Hey everyone, Monica Brain here for Amaranth Trusted Voices um, webinar, and we're going to get started in just a few minutes. I'm just waiting for some more people to join, but if you don't know about, I'm the project specialist for Amaranth Critical Infrastructure, and what we do is we help tribes write grants, do project management, all kinds of fun stuff like that. If you're interested, you can contact Amaranth and we can help you out with that. And if you don't know about Amaranth, we are the only tribally owned insurance company in the United States. And I'm really excited for this conversation today. I've got Natua Garcia with us. He is going to talk about fire safety. And if you didn't know, fires are the number one claim that we have at our insurance company. So, not all fires can be prevented, but there's a lot that you can do to prevent fires. So, Natua, what do you think? You ready to talk about fire safety today?
Yep, let's do it. Let's get it done. We will explain a little bit about fire.
Let's start at the beginning.
Okay, perfect.
And then just wanted to let folks know, if you want to put questions in the chat, go for it. He'll keep an eye on it, but I'll be back at the end to do a little more Q&A. Have a good one.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good morning. Today, we're going to talk about fire prevention, protecting tribal communities. So why we started talking about the tribal communities, because obviously we have individual homeowners. We have people that are part of the Housing Authority, the IHBG program. We also have tribal governments and businesses who play a pretty big part or big role in our community, especially on some of the safety infrastructure. So fire prevention, protecting tribal communities. Our objectives, recognize the types of disasters you may face, understand key ingredients for fire, understand, the fire pyramid, the triangle, understand defensible space and the importance. We always talk about defensible space, making sure we play defense, making sure we're a lot more proactive than we are reactive, just because that fire travels at a tremendous speed that we may often can't comprehend, because, we see a big mass moving and saying, oh, that's about 2 miles per hour, 3 miles per hour. In reality, it might be 35 to 70 miles per hour. We're going to understand the importance of an emergency action plan, understand the importance of a fire prevention plan, and, we're going to talk about communities at work. Because this stuff, once we have the plan in place, once we take those proactive measures in the event of a lightning strike that causes a wildfire, we're, protected in that instance. For me, being a Native American, living in a Native community, working in a Native community, and also serving Native communities, I see our use for fire as being very important, right? We have hunting, our food preservation, smoking salmon. For me, specifically being a farmer in the Southwest, crop management, and even, creating new fields, burning alfalfa fields to try to create more of that, put that nitrogen back into the soil. So that's just part of our, everyday fire mitigation, for farming. Fireproof areas, medicines, travel, warfare, clear waterways, and the ceremonial use of the fire. Oftentimes there's fire societies, fire clans. So that native use of fire is very important. But sometimes what we tend to forget is respecting that fire. Taking those proactive measures so we don't burn the valley down. So once again, safety begins with the basics, eliminating and preventing fire hazards in your home and communities. We have life safety mechanisms. They're an important part of our fire prevention in our homes and within the community. Something as simple as a fire detector or smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, even having a functioning emergency alert system like a fire alarm, right? Do we have those in our community buildings? Does it work in the fitness center? Does it work in the clinic? Does it work at the senior center? Because think about it, our home is our refuge or our safe haven, even our communities. I think about it all the time. If I was to live outside my community, I would always want to come back home because, that's safe for me. We're taught to believe that's the center of the world. So Our home is our safe refuge. Let's protect it. Like always, I work in the risk control portion of the office or the operations here at Amarin. So we're going to talk a little bit about the fire losses and why, kind of give us a little background on why we constantly want to talk about fire prevention, why we constantly are talking about home fire safety, the basics of home fire safety, is because fire continues to be a repeated offender on being one of, our highest perils. So just some numbers on that. So within that 3-year period across all lines of coverage, so our tribal governments and businesses, tribal workers comp, Indian housing block grant, and Native American homeowners and renters, our total was 189,596,875. That's a lot of money. And why did I decide to add workers comp is because I just want to show that it's affected across all coverages. Oh, well, I work in the kitchen. There's no way that fire can affect me. Well, wrong. People are getting burned. Maybe those are just small tips, small reminders on ways we could stop that problem before a big catastrophe happens. We look at our Indian housing block grant. It accounts for about 62% of the total fire losses, with about 118 million. Our next second highest tribal governments and businesses is $62 million. Native American homeowners, $8 million, and our workers comp within that 3-year period is 634,000. So that's about 0.33%, but it's still fire losses. So I just wanted to show you guys what that 3-year period is looking like. If you're visual, we take a look at the Indian housing block grant. What is the big cause of fire there? Kitchen fires, right? 44% are kitchen fires, and another 44% are arson related. So our big thing is, how do we prevent these kitchen fires? What do we do to prevent the kitchen fires? Are they grease fires? Are they, what are the main causes of those kitchen fires? Moving on, we have tribal governments and businesses. Take a look at what one of our main causes is. Once again, kitchen fire, but the scary one is electrical fires. So when we think about the impact of electrical fires, are we not updating our buildings? Are we using frayed electrical cords? Are we using space heaters? Our circuit's not up to date, or not able to have that kind of load impact. Were we using more electricity during COVID because we rely on technology to perform daily functions, things like that, right? When we look at our Native American homeowners and renters, the other huge loss would be electrical fires in the homes. So once again, kind of, we see a trend between kitchen fires, electrical fires, and arson. Okay, those are 3 main things we're going to cover across tribal governments and businesses, Native American homeowners, and the IHBG programs. So our life safety components, and think about this when we're in our desk, when we're in our office, when we are at home. Do we have working smoke detectors? Are there carbon monoxide detectors? Are we updating our batteries twice a year? Make it a habit. Once in Christmas time, the other 4th of July. Stovetop passive extinguishing systems. If we're housing authority, or even Native American homeowner renter that wants to make sure we protect our house just one step, we could use that stovetop passive extinguishing system. Our fire extinguishers, I know a lot of our IHBG homes have fire extinguishers in them, but when was the last time they were serviced? When was the last time they were updated? I seen one that wasn't updated since 2007. When you think about that date, you say, "Oh, it's not too long ago." But when you really do sit back and think about it, that was over 20 years. So think about that. Do we have a fire evacuation plan? If we do have multi-story buildings, safety collapsible ladders, what are our life safety components? Are those fire hydrants outside? Are those charged? Can we get water out of them? Or is it kind of just um, the bare minimum of the infrastructure that was, oh, it was a good idea a couple of years ago, but now we don't have a way to get water out there. We need to make sure all those are tested regularly and updated. So the ingredients of a fire, as you may know, all three must be present for a fire to happen. So we need oxygen, okay, to start and sustain combustion. Air supply can be increased by windy conditions. We need heat to raise fuel temperatures to the ignition point and to ignite fuels. Common sources of heat are lightning and human activities. A cigarette. Here in New Mexico is so dry, we haven't had a lot of rain or snow. So, throwing a cigarette butt out the window, has potential to cause that big wildfire. Um, Fuel, you need enough fuel to sustain and carry flames. Combustible materials include, trees, shrubs, grasses, and, structures. We saw a combination of all three of those in LA and those wildfires. Um, those homes are just going up and up and up, just one after another. Three methods of heat transfer. We have conduction, transfer of heat through solids, convection, transfer of heat by movement of air, and radiation, transfer of heat by electromagnetic waves. What controls that fire? So weather includes wind, temperature, cloudiness, the humidity, moisture, and air pressure. The topography, the physical features of an area, including slope, the aspect, direction it faces, wind, how it moves rapidly up the slopes, increasing the speed at which a fire can spread. Draws can act like chimney and funnel flames upward. South and west facing slopes have drier fuel than north and east facing slopes. Fuels are vegetation and structures. So just think about that, right? We could think about it in our community. We could think about it in smaller aspects such as our home, or even more microscopic, a shed. Do we have a lot of fuel around those areas? Do we have a lot of fuel around our homes? Did we forget to maintain the grass, or in my case, the weeds throughout the summer months? And monsoon season hits, lightning strike occurs, the weeds go up in flames. 4th of July happens, the weeds go up in flames. We lose our house. So really important to make sure we don't have enough fuels around our perimeter, because most of our communities are within the wild urban interface. A place where humans and their development meet or intermix with wildland fuel. They have big population shifts. The wildland urban interface was the fastest growing in the U.S. between 1990 and 2010 due to the growth of population. 97% were the result of new housing. Okay, so we're even seeing that in our communities, in our tribes. We're expanding, we're getting bigger, and now we have to go further and further out. And so some of the communities are out what we call the boonies or the woods. So we're starting to see a lot of a shift towards those wildland urban interface, where we do mix with wildland. A home ignition zone, so that makes us more wary and more cognizant of our home ignition zone. Our immediate zone, 0 to 5 feet, our intermediate zone, 5 to 30 feet, and our extended zone, 30 to 100 feet. And, just having these perimeters and guidelines not only help us with fire, but also help us, with wind, hail, and other perils, right? We have that tree that we would mean to cut down that's within our immediate zone. Whether it be wind, hail, or a fire, that's still going to cause, damage to our house. So our home ignition zone, conduction, usually direct flame or fire brands, embers. Temperatures increase causes the material to pyrolyze. Pyrolyzed material begins to burn. So that's within our immediate zone, 0 to 5 feet. Convection, as a wildfire progresses, the heated air dries and raises the temperatures of the fuel. So, we see this within 5 to 30 feet. That convection is pretty scary, especially when you get a little burst of wind. It spreads, it gets hot, the air's, all the oxygen sucked out of the area. So, it's hard for you to breathe in that situation. Radiant heat. The less time a home is exposed to the radiant heat, the better the chances it will be standing. The bigger the distance from the fire, less heat is absorbed by the home. So that's our extended zone, 30 to 100 feet. Um, that's another thing to consider when removing trees or removing debris from your yard and creating that defensible space. Is we want to see how far that tree stand is, and how long our home will be exposed to that radiant heat. Overlapping home ignition zones increases the necessity for social cooperation to mitigate the potential of structure ignition. So get to know your neighbors and share information to guard the community against wildfires. So the beautiful thing about our communities is, we know each other. Chances are we're family members to our neighbors. And so we would have to work together to create those overlapping home ignition zones, make sure that we, clear out that area so it's safe for everyone. We have a good opportunity to create that community aspect, especially seeing what happened in Los Angeles with how fast those fires spread and how quickly they spread. So having that defensible space built up for not only yourself but your neighbors and oftentimes your family members is just a good, community practice. And the other thing, being in a tribe, the chairman, the chief, the governor also has the ability to mandate, the community members to have, a clean yard. Ordinances that maintain that allow you to maintain your yard, keep it up in presentable situation. So, overlapping home ignition zones really good. Be friends with your neighbors. Think about your neighbors. Love your neighbors. You love yourself. The golden rule. So think about the fire hazard assessment, evaluation of areas of service, recognizing hazard components, rank the hazard components, compile the hazard rankings in a usable manner, and utilize assessment to plan future actions. Okay, assessments could be something as simple as a fire drill. Think about, when was the last time you had a fire drill at your workplace? What was the takeaways? Did everybody get out of the building in a reasonable time? Were there people that said it wasn't real, didn't count? Think about that when you're doing an assessment for future actions. Okay. The other thing it might be was the stairs were down, the stairs were cluttered, because in the event of a fire, if we have a multi-story building, we cannot use the elevator. We have to use the stairs. So, are you fire wise? Think about this. It's a good little outline to have. You know, we want to have scattered trees within 30 feet of the structure. Have that 30-foot structure cleared out. The thing we often tend to forget is cleaning our chimneys and screened, getting leaves out of the gutter. Okay, make sure we have a water hose. Where's our storage shed located? Is it away from the home? Avoid outdoor burning. Recycle mulch. Compost when possible. Have access to the driveway and the address visible. That's the thing I often see that's kind of missing from our tribal communities is sometimes the driveways aren't accessible and the address isn't visible, or it might be named something completely different. So make sure that we have that accessible and visible. The other thing that I often see is wood piles and fuel tanks right up against the home. Make sure we get that 30 feet from the structure. That's just an accident waiting to happen there if we're storing that wood right on the home, right next to the door, or next to a fire vent, or a area where maybe an ember could get hit, or start the porch on fire, whatever it may be. Structure hazards. Look at the location of the structure. What is the building material and design? We can reduce the density of the surrounding forest. Keep that grass short and watered. Keep those weeds down. Once again, prune those branches up to 6 feet. It'll also help with, wind claims. just because those dead branches, the trees, they were less likely to fall off with high winds. So another reason to keep your area clean is the hantavirus. I know growing up, especially in the Southwest, is in the Southwest they have the highest number of cases for hantavirus. So it would always be one of the things my grandma would always tell us: "Hey, you better watch out for the hantavirus. Now you need to wear a mask because there's hantavirus." And it seems like all these wives' tales, legends are starting to come back full force. So we saw a couple weeks ago with Mr. Hackman's wife. She died of hantavirus, right? Everybody was saying carbon monoxide, but it ended up being hantavirus. Um, so from 2020, there's been 834 infected people in America. The thing that's kind of alarming to me is when we look at the race, 74% of the people are white and 17% are American Indian / Alaskan Native. So that's kind of an alarming rate for me as we see we're the second highest population, Native Americans. Uh, Hantavirus can cause serious illness that affects lungs and kidneys. It's a zoonotic disease. It's passed from animals to humans. When an infected rodent can get virus in the air, with urine droppings or nesting materials. Humans are affected by breathing in the contaminated air. Clean up. Use gloves, mask, and bleach to sanitize the area. Seal up, trap up, clean up. That was the message from the CDC. So please, 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 if you're having any signs, fever, fatigue, muscle aches, large muscle groups like the thighs, the hip, the back, sometimes the shoulders, please go seek immediate help, get some attention. Um, it could be too late, right? If you want to be macho, scared of the doctor, scared of some needles like me, please, please, please go get that checked out. Think about the last time what you were doing last. Oh, I was cleaning up the shed. Oh, I was cleaning up the barn. All these things where a mouse or mice can be living, rodents can be living. That should alarm you to say, all right, I need to go get this checked out. So, how can you make your home fire safe? So, we'd want to install, test, and maintain all smoke detectors in the home. We want to install carbon monoxide detectors, maintain working fire extinguishers in the home, install those stovetop passive extinguishing systems. At work, is training on fire extinguishers given? Do we have operating smoke detectors? Are the emergency lights maintained? Little things that could really save lives in the event of an emergency. So, really quick, I know we harp on it and go every single time talking about the pass system. What does that mean? Um, First, it's pull the pin, aim the nozzle at the base of the fire, squeeze the handle to release the retardant, and sweep the fire. So pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. Pass. It could be something as simple as a 7-minute toolbox talk or a quick little refresher from your safety officer, just to go over that system right there. Because not a lot of us use the fire extinguishers. It's kind of an awkward situation. It's an emergency situation. They're kind of heavy and awkward. So what do we do? Do we pull it down? Do we yank the pin? So learning the pass system really will save time, money, and resources. So we think about the hazards in your community. Okay, think about our homes. Think about the yards, tribal buildings, abandoned buildings, lack of resources. Could all those be hazards? In our homes, on a small micro level, some hazards, the big ones we see are in the kitchen, right? We have our kitchen, we have cooking hazards, we have electrical hazards, maybe our outlets are starting to get damaged, need some updating. If the tribe doesn't have the resources, we don't have the resources or money. And so it just becomes ignored over time. And eventually that circuit pops, gets too hot, starts a fire in the home. So those are some of the hazards we see. What about the hazards in the yards? We talked briefly about the hantavirus, being a hazard with rodents. But another thing could be a fire hazard is, improperly storing gas and flammable liquids and materials, not maintaining our grass to a certain level, and the weeds in the house or around the house or in the yard. Um, old cars, sheds that might have collapsed, things like that. What about our tribal buildings? What are some hazards in the tribal building? Maybe non maintained sidewalks. Also, the problem with the grass and weeds. But the big one we see in arson is abandoned buildings. For whatever reason, squatters. We see a lot of fires in abandoned buildings, and we classify them as arson. And also, we have communities that have a lack of resources. They don't have the ability to have fire trucks or fire hydrants out there in remote areas of South Dakota, remote areas of Alaska. So what they have to do is think about life or death. Are we going to sit here and try to fight this fire, or are we going to leave and live and want to get away from that fire so we don't burn? Things like that. Those are the hazards that we're faced with. Those are the hazards that are unique to Native America and how rural some of our communities are. So we need to have an action plan. We need to develop mitigation strategies, develop fire response evaluation plans, develop region-wide cooperative and fire protection agreements, with neighboring communities, and distribute public fire safety education information. Those should all be part of our action plan. So creating an emergency plan, assemble the emergency supply kit and place it in a safe spot. Remember to include important documents, medication, and personal identification. Develop an emergency evacuation plan and practice it with everyone in your home. Plan 2 ways out of your neighborhood and designate a meeting place. Learn about emergency preparedness planning on NFPA's emergency planning webpage. So that's another resource we use is NFPA. At the end of the presentation, we have a couple links to their website, but creating that emergency plan. And on a more, let's say a tribal government level, what is our emergency plan, to get the employees out safely? Do we have a notification reporting? Is there a text? Is there an email that gets sent out? Is it through the, tribal administrator? Is it through the emergency management office? Little things to think about, because when that emergency does happen, that's when we tend to, need that guidance the most, but we tend to wing it, So make sure we have that plan. Make sure we practice that plan. Practice all the time. Can't emphasize practicing enough. Making a fire escape plan. Making a fire escape plan out of your office, out of places you frequent. The conference room, the dining room, the kitchen, your office, your bedroom. Have 2 ways out. Is using the window part of one of your ways to get out? Well, hey, let's rehearse it. Let's mentally rehearse it, because in the event of that fire, event of that emergency, we don't have time to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. We have to say, oh my gosh, this is what we practice. Bless the window and let's get out. And so because we talk about, the stovetop fire stops, stovetop suppression fire stops. We talk about fire extinguishers. All those come with a cost. And there's a FEMA grant opportunity. It's through the Fire Prevention and Safety Grant. As part of the assistance of firefighters, and supports projects that enhance the safety of the public and firefighters from fire and related hazards. It would be something that tribes and housing authorities can apply for. Once again, we could guide you in that direction, help you out with maybe some questions you might have. Send you the link again for those grant opportunities. But here at Ameren, we're not able to apply for those grant opportunities. So it's going to have to be up to the individual tribe, up to the individual housing authority to apply for those grants. If you go right now, the website's a little bit wonky. but be assured to keep an eye out for any updates. This new administration's a little bit, difficult to predict what's going to happen next. So the best thing we could do is just keep looking for an update through that FEMA grant. So I put the link up there on the presentation. But if anything, if you need more information, please just feel free to give me a call. And I could also send you a list of these resources, nfpa.org, firewise.org. Any questions, you could contact the team at Ameren Risk Control Team at ameren.com. Thank you. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, concerns, my information's right there, email address, and number. So thank you guys.
Snatua, that was very informative. Great. Are you still there?
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions while we wait and see if anybody has any questions for Natoa. You can put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to read them. I really appreciated the talking about the things around the house, like cleaning up the brush and stuff like that. Where do you stand on like raking up the leaves and then burning them in a burn barrel? Or, like trying to get rid of them instead of throwing them in the trash?
Yeah, and if we're going to do that, if we're going to burn, we have to make sure, take a look at the weather forecast, get the appropriate permitting. Believe it or not, and that helps in case, a fire extinguisher or a fire engine comes, that all comes at a cost. A couple of years ago, we had a fire and the wildland came. We had our permit, so that was able for the tribal government to kind of foot the bill for that because it ended up being like $30,000 for the call. So make sure you have the appropriate permits. Make sure you don't burn on a super windy day. And if it is absolutely necessary, extinguish your flames. Even if it's smoking, starting to smolder, a little bit of wind could, reignite. So make sure we dump some water on that. Have it in an area and have a plan. Have a plan before you burn. A lot of times people just start to burn with no plan. Where's the water hose? Where's the shovel? Throw some dirt on it. They have no plan. They just light it and say, oh, look at the flames. So make sure we have the plan. Because that fire changes, like we talked about, 30 miles per hour, 70 miles per hour. That's fast, a lot faster than we can move.
Yeah, today here in New Mexico, we're going to have a red flag warning coming later this afternoon, next 2 days. No burning, no nothing, or we're going to be in a lot of trouble. I always was hoping that I could get some goats to come and clear out the weeds in my backyard.
I think the Pueblo of Sandia is actually using goats to clear out their bosque area, like behind.
I love it.
What is it? Their lakes, Sandia Lakes. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. One other question before we wrap up. How do you know if your fire extinguisher in your house, I have these little kitty fire extinguishers, put one under the sink and one in the bedroom. How do you know that they still work? Do you have to test them?
You can get them tested. They usually have a life of 8 years. But, using that regularly going and, making sure we kind of stir up that agent, those are all things we could take a look at if, there's any dings or if like the place where it says, charged or, overcharged, undercharged, if it drops any, or if it's overcharged, that's still one of the things where you would have to take it out of service. So those monthly inspections, those routine inspections of that fire extinguisher is really huge in maintenance and making sure that it's gonna perform when I need it to. Because like there'll be times where maybe those little kitties are cracked on the top, or you see it's undercharged, and people just keep them in there, and they say, "Oh well, it didn't work," or that tamper seal's moved. All those little small details you have to take very serious because in the event of emergency, you can't say, "Oh well, I should have done that, and I knew it was cracked." It's like yeah, and I know it's one of those things where it's a little. You kind of have that ability, or you kind of have that mindset of, oh, this is never going to happen to me. Like I'll be okay as long as or my extinguisher is never going to malfunction. It said it on the box. Those are all those things we have to think about. What are we going to do if our extinguisher does malfunction, doesn't work? What's our next step? Are we going to smother the fire? Is the fire small enough? Are we just going to call 911 to get out of the building or the home? What if that line of defense doesn't work? What's our next thing? So it's one of the things that allows me to be somewhat decent at my job is I always think about the craziest possibilities. Like, oh well, this is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. It happens, and you're like, whoa, I thought about that. Dang, I was prepared for that. I was prepared for that situation. So always preparing for your craziest imagined ideas, dreams. You have to, because that fire, those experiences. Some of the claims that we see are just you would think they're unbelievable. A dog lit the stove, pushed a pizza box, and that's what caused a fire on one of the claims that we had. So
I believe it.
it happens.
I had to put child safety locks on my stove because of my dog.
Oh yeah, I couldn't believe it. It's wild. And then even on the work comm side, there was a lady who had a little bit of a breathing problem. They were burning sage in the cultural center. She didn't realize her door or her office was right above. Started having a little bit of irritation in the throat. So it's like one of those things. Like you don't think about these things until we're in them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really want to thank you for sharing your information with us today. And coming up next, we're going to have a webinar on file management. Instead of saving everything onto your desktop into a folder called files, there might be a better way. So stay tuned for that. We'll send you the link as well. And as always, we will put this up and send you an email afterwards with the slides so you can have access to both the grant website and any other information that NATA has shared. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you.